The deafening screams of the Denobulan colonists rang out as the massive Skrik warriors dragged them from their homes. But no one in the galaxy heard them. No one cared, until the desperate distress signal reached Earth. The peaceful Denobulan research colony on remote Zeta Reticuli 4 never stood a chance. When the hostile insectoid Skrik invaded, the diminutive Denobulan philosophers watched in horror as their defenses crumbled. Mantis-like aliens 3 times their size smashed through barricades, storming the settlement. Neutron blasters cut down any who resisted. Within hours, the streets ran blue with Denobulan blood. As the situation turned hopeless, colony leader Deneb fled to a hidden bunker. With shaking hands, he activated the emergency beacon. A distress signal blasted into the void, pleading for any spacefaring civilization to send aid before the Skrik massacred or enslaved them all. 8 light-years away, the transmission reached Earth. The humans listened to the anguished cries of Denobulan hatchlings ripped from their parents' arms. Anger surged through every man and woman. Without hesitation, Earth mobilized its finest soldiers. A rapid response force led by battle-hardened Captain Lawrence Davis boarded the heavy cruiser Indomitable and burned hard for Zeta Reticuli. Racing against time, the Earth vessel screamed through space, desperate to reach the colony before the Skrik atrocities went too far. But when Davis and his team reached orbit, they found only ruin and despair. The settlement lay in shambles, defenses shattered. Skrik hunter-killer ships prowled the ruins, disruptors primed. Patrols of 10-foot-tall armored Skrik warriors marched through blood-slicked streets, rounding up the last ragged survivors for the slave pens. The Denobulan scientists never had a chance against such brutality. Advanced philosophy and art were useless in the face of merciless, overwhelming force. Their harmonious colonies fell in mere days against endless waves of Skrik shock troops. Now, hunched in a hidden vantage point, Davis peered through macro binoculars at the horrifying scenes of wanton slaughter and cruelty. Scores of Denobulans, young and old, lay dead in the streets. The rest huddled in chains and cages, under the black gaze of pitiless compound eyes. It was only a matter of hours before the Skrik relocated their prisoners off-world to hellish labor camps and lives of endless servitude. Davis knew if he abandoned them now, those captured Denobulans would suffer fates far worse than death. The prospects looked grim. The human infiltration team was outnumbered 20-1. They had scant intel on Skrik deployments, numbers, or technology. It would take a miracle to pull off any rescue against such odds. However, as dusk fell and the acrid smoke of the colony's ruins curled into the crimson sky, Captain Davis saw a fleeting chance. One desperate opportunity to save lives from the Skrik's clutches. In the cover of darkness, a few men could slip past Skrik sentries, liberate some of the prisoners, steal a Skrik transport, and escape to the Indomitable under cloak. The raid would be a massive risk. It would put Davis and his soldiers in extreme jeopardy and could easily end in disaster. If it failed, there would be human blood mixing with the Denobulan in the colony's streets, and Earth would be making an enemy of the ruthless Skrik Imperium. But if it succeeded, at least some innocent Denobulans would have a chance at survival and freedom, snatched from the insectoid monster's claws. The choice weighed heavily on the captain as he checked his plasma rifle and looked over at the grim faces of his men. What would Davis do? Dare the impossible to save lives or leave now and avoid catastrophe? Could human courage and resolve snatch victory from the jaws of annihilation? Or would cold, harsh reality crush any hope of resistance against the Skrik onslaught? With a deep breath, Davis activated his short-range comm to inform his soldiers of the fateful decision that would change the galaxy forever. With a heavy heart but unwavering commitment, Captain Lawrence Davis looked each of his hand-picked soldiers in the eye. "We're going back for them," he declared, his voice low but filled with steel. "No one gets left behind on my watch." Sergeant Mike Thompson, nursing a plasma burn on his shoulder, nodded grimly. "Damn straight, Cap. Those bug-eyed bastards aren't getting away with this." Private Jose Ramirez, the demolitions expert, flashed a predatory grin as he checked his explosives. Time to show these Skrik what happens when you piss off the human race. Under the cover of the alien world's twin moons, the strike team moved out, activating the advanced stealth tech built into their combat armor. Shimmering fields enveloped each soldier, bending light and sensor waves to render them all but invisible against the blasted colony ruins. They ghosted past Skrik patrols, the towering insectoid warriors oblivious to the humans' presence mere meters away. Davis led them unerringly towards the makeshift prison camp where Deneb had indicated the remaining Denobulan captives were held. As they approached the electrified perimeter fence, Davis spotted the hunched figure of Deneb among a cluster of raggedly survivors. The Denobulan leader's eyes widened as the humans shimmered into view, hardly daring to believe their unexpected saviors had returned. "Thank the ancestors," Deneb breathed as Ramirez made short work of the locks with a precisely aimed plasma torch. "I thought we were forsaken." "Not on our watch," Davis reassured him, herding the weakened Denobulans out of the cage and into Thompson's care. "Mike, get them to the hangar. We'll cover you." But even as the words left Davis's mouth, a piercing alarm split the night. A sharp-eyed Skrik guard had spotted the humans and was now shrieking for backup. Within moments, the strike team was surrounded, insectoid warriors pouring from every direction with weapons jam-packed. Ramirez cursed, priming a set of shaped charges. "I'll make us a hole, Cap." He hurled the explosives into the largest mass of Skrik and dove for cover. The charges detonated in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel, blasting ragged gaps in the enemy lines. Davis and Thompson seized the opening, laying down a blistering hail of covering fire as the liberated Denobulans raced for a clutch of Skrik transports. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the hangar as the humans pushed forward, their advanced rifles cutting down Skrik warriors with lethal precision. But the odds were heavily stacked against them. For every insectoid that fell, 3 more surged forward, organic cannons spewing gouts of searing energy. Davis saw Thompson stagger as a plasma bolt caught him in the gut, the sergeant going down hard. Gritting his teeth, Davis rushed to his friend's side, slinging Thompson's arm over his shoulders and half dragging, half carrying him towards the waiting shuttle where the Denobulans cowered. Behind them, Ramirez and the few remaining soldiers fought like men possessed, pouring fire into the Skrik horde, even as they fell one by one. Davis reached the shuttle ramp, pushing Thompson into Deneb's arms. "Get him out of here!" the captain roared. Deneb shook his head frantically. "What about you? We can't leave you!" Davis's face was a mask of anguish as he looked back at Ramirez and the others, still holding the line against hopeless odds. "You have to," he said roughly. "We'll buy you time to get clear." Ignoring Deneb's desperate protests, Davis slapped the ramp controls, sealing the Denobulans inside. He watched the shuttle lift off on shaky thrusters, weaving drunkenly as Skrik ships swooped in pursuit, strafing it with plasma fire. Davis raised his rifle and charged back into the fray, joining Ramirez in a final defiant stand. They fought back to back, human fury and skill matched against Skrik's savagery and numbers. Even as Davis felt searing agony lance through his body from a dozen wounds, he kept pulling the trigger, kept cutting down the relentless insectoid attackers. Ramirez cried out as a plasma bolt sheared through his leg, sending him crashing to the hangar deck. Alone now, Davis planted himself over his fallen comrade, a one-man bulwark against the Skrik tide. His vision blurred, his blood mingled with alien ichor on the ground, but still he fought on, buying precious seconds for the shuttle to escape. He saw it finally clear the hangar, engines flaring as it clawed for open sky and the safety of the Indomitable high above. Only then did Davis allow himself to falter, his rifle slipping from numb fingers as a tsunami of Skrik warriors finally overtook him. As darkness crashed in and he felt himself falling, Davis's last thought was a silent prayer that Thompson and the Denobulans would make it to safety, that his sacrifice, and that of his soldiers, hadn't been in vain. The battered shuttle careened into the Indomitable's landing bay on a comet tail of sparks and smoke, swarmed instantly by medical teams ready to treat the wounded. Hovering on the edge of consciousness, Sergeant Thompson searched the new arrivals, hoping against hope to see Davis and the others stagger from the boarding ramp. But as the grim reality sank in, The awful truth writ plain on Deneb's face. Thompson knew his captain and friends had given their lives to save them all. Aboard the bridge, the Indomitable's commander took in the scene unfolding on his monitors. The lurching evac shuttle disgorging its load of bloodied human soldiers and terrified Denobulan refugees. The Skrik warships banking hard to pursue. The chilling lack of any other human life signs on the planet below. Eyebrows furrowed, the commander realized the full import of what Davis and his team had done, and the terrible price they had paid. But there would be time to mourn later, time to honor their valiant last stand. Right now, the Indomitable had to survive, had to get the intel on this new threat back to Earth. The commander saw the Skrik ships closing in, a vast armada of chitin and malice that could tear his vessel apart if it came to a straight fight. "Prepare for emergency warp jump," he barked. Warnings flashed across the bridge displays. The Indomitable was in bad shape, her systems strained to the breaking point. A warp jump now could tear the ship apart. But there was no choice. The Skrik ships opened fire, lances of plasma hammering the Indomitable's faltering shields. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, crewmen rushing to beat out the flames. "Warp! Jump on my mark!" The commander held his breath, watching the indicators flicker towards green, willing the abused engines to hold together. "Mark!" The Indomitable vanished in a blaze of light, a split second ahead of a storm of plasma bolts that ripped through the space she had just occupied. When the searing afterimages faded, the human ship was gone, leaving the swarming Skrik armada grasping at emptiness. Dragging itself out of warp jump on the ragged edge of friendly space, the Indomitable shuddered and groaned like a mortally wounded beast. Damage alarms wailed, the scent of scorched metal and overloaded circuits choking the air. In the medical bay, a battered Sergeant Thompson clung to consciousness, his hand clasped weakly in Deneb's. "We have to tell them," the human soldier rasped through cracked lips. "Have to warn Earth." "We will," Deneb promised, his voice thick with grief and gratitude. "We will not let their sacrifice be in vain." As the limping Indomitable set course for the distant blue marble of Earth, skeletal crew laboring frantically to hold the ship together for the journey home, a grim realization settled over all aboard like a shroud. The Skrik were coming, ravenous, relentless, bent on conquest, an insectoid swarm that would devour all in its path, enslaving and slaughtering any civilization that stood against them. Humanity had bloodied the Skrik. True enough, the stunning bravery and skill of Davis and his soldiers had seen to that. But it was only the first skirmish in what would be a long and brutal war for survival. Worlds would burn, armies would clash, whole species would be snuffed out like candle flames. But in that darkest hour, with the Indomitable carrying its cargo of grief and defiance back to the unsuspecting worlds of the human alliance, one thing burned bright. The indomitable human spirit, that unbreakable will, that stubborn refusal to submit or surrender. It had carried Davis and his soldiers through the gates of hell, and it would carry the whole human race through the trials to come. Earth would fight, as would the Denobulans, the Gammons, the Rossi, all the free peoples of the galaxy who refused to bend knee before Skrik aggression. They would pay in blood and sacrifice and tears. But they would fight. Led by men like Davis and Thompson and Ramirez, they would fight to the bitter end and beyond, to their dying breaths, to preserve the light of freedom against the insectoid darkness. As the Indomitable carried its grim tidings back to the unsuspecting worlds of mankind, a cold certainty crystallized in the tear-streaked faces of the bridge crew. The Skrik had started this war, but by all that was holy, humanity would finish it, no matter the odds, despite the toll. The Skrik would learn to their eternal sorrow the true of meaning of the old human saying, "Fuck around and find out." The Indomitable shuddered as it dropped out of warp, alarms blaring throughout the battered vessel. Captain Davis gripped the arms of his command chair, surveying the damage readouts scrolling across his console. "Status report," he barked. Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across his science station. Hull integrity at 62%, shields offline, warp core unstable. We're venting atmosphere from decks 4 through 7. Davis nodded grimly. They'd escaped the Skrik for now, but at a terrible cost. He turned to Deneb, the Denobulan leader hunched in pain beside him. How are your people holding up? Deneb managed a weak smile. We're alive thanks to you, Captain. That's what matters. The moment of relief was short-lived. Ensign Park's voice cut through the bridge chatter. Sir, 3 vessels on an intercept course, Andorian Imperial Guard. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing sleek blue warships filled with weaponry. A harsh voice crackled over the comm. Unidentified vessel. You have entered restricted Andorian space. Power down and prepare to be boarded or you will be destroyed. Davis exchanged glances with Chen and Deneb. This was the moment of truth. Open a channel, Davis ordered. He took a deep breath and addressed the Andorian fleet. This is Captain Lawrence Davis of the Earthship Indomitable. We come seeking your aid against a common enemy. There was a tense pause before the Andorian commander responded, his antennae twitching with suspicion. We have no allies among the Pinkskins. State your business or leave our territory immediately. Davis leaned forward, his voice urgent. The Skrik are coming. They've already devastated multiple systems. Without a united front, they'll overrun us all. The Andorian's eyes narrowed. The Skrik are contained. Your fear-mongering won't sway us, human. Please, Deneb interjected. My people, the Denobulans, have already fallen. We barely escaped with our lives. Another pause, longer this time. Davis held his breath. Finally, the Andorian spoke. You will lower your shields and allow us to board. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. We will determine the truth of your claims and your fate. The channel closed. Davis nodded to Chen. Do it, and tell Sergeant Thompson to have a security team ready, just in case. Minutes later, the clang of magnetic grapples signaled the arrival of the Andorian boarding party. Davis stood at the airlock, flanked by Thompson and 2 of his Marines. The door hissed open, revealing a contingent of blue-skinned warriors, phase pistols drawn. Their leader, a stern-faced female with ice in her eyes, stepped forward. I am Commander Tala of the Imperial Guard. You will take us to your bridge immediately. Davis inclined his head. Of course, Commander. This way. As they walked, Davis spoke quietly but urgently. The Skrik threat is real. We have sensor data, battle footage. Tala cut him off. Save your words, human. We will examine your so-called evidence ourselves. They reached the bridge where Chen and Deneb waited anxiously. Tala's gaze swept the battered command center, lingering on the alien refugees huddled in corners. You spoke of proof, she said coldly. Show me. Chen pulled up the sensor logs, images of Skrik ships swarming across star systems. This is what we faced at Zeta Reticuli 4, he explained. An armada unlike anything we've ever seen. Tala's antenna twitched as she absorbed the data. Her expression remained impassive, but Davis sensed a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Deneb stepped forward, his voice hoarse. I am Deneb, leader of the Denobulan refugees. We came to you once before, warning of the Skrik. You turned us away. Now our world burns, our people enslaved or slaughtered. Tala's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. If what you say is true... A proximity alarm cut through the tense silence. Chen's eyes widened in horror as he checked his readings. Skrik ships! A full battle group just dropped out of warp! Davis whirled to face the Andorian commander. This is it, Tala. The choice is yours. Fight with us, or we all die separately. Tala's hand hovered over her communicator as Skrik vessels filled the view screen. The fate of 2 civilizations hung in the balance. Davis took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was it. Their one shot at survival. He nodded to Chen, who activated the view screen. I am Captain Lawrence Davis of the Earthship Indomitable, he said, voice firm despite his exhaustion. We come seeking alliance against a common foe. Please grant us an audience with your leadership. The Andorian commander's antennae twitched with obvious skepticism. We have no interest in your petty conflicts, human. Deneb stepped forward, his normally gentle features set with urgency. "Commander, please. The Denobulans have long been friends to Andoria. I beg you to hear us out." Hours of tense negotiation followed. Davis laid out the Skrik threat in stark terms, while Deneb vouched for humanity's courage and resourcefulness. Finally, grudgingly, the Andorians agreed to grant them sanctuary, under heavy guard. The Indomitable limped into dock at a remote Andorian outpost. As repair crews swarmed over the battered ship, Davis wasted no time. He strode into the command center, Chen at his side with data tabs full of sensor logs and tactical analyses. "This is what we faced at Zeta Reticuli," Davis said, bringing up holographic displays of the Skrik armada. "An enemy that outnumbers and outguns us at every turn." The Andorian officers studied the data, antennae quivering. Davis pressed on, detailing world after fallen world. "The Skrik won't stop until they've conquered or exterminated every sentient species in the galaxy. Our only hope is to stand together." But centuries of isolation and prejudice were not easily overcome. The Andorians remained obstinate, unwilling to commit their forces to an alien cause. Davis paced in his quarters that night, mind racing. There had to be a way to convince them. Then inspiration struck. He called Deneb to his room. "That Skrik decryption algorithm," Davis said. "Think you can get it to our science team without the Andorians noticing?" Deneb hesitated, then nodded. "I believe so, but why?" "Because if we can prove the Skrik are coming for Andoria next, they'll have no choice but to join us." The next day was a frenzy of covert activity. Chen and her team worked around the clock, sifting through intercepted Skrik transmissions. Finally, as Davis was mid-argument with yet another skeptical Andorian general, Chen burst in. "Captain," she said, face pale, "you need to see this." The data was irrefutable. A massive Skrik fleet, larger than anything they'd yet encountered, was mere days from reaching Andorian space. Their goal, to enslave the entire species. The revelation sent shockwaves through Andorian high command. After hours of heated debate, the moderates finally prevailed. Andoria would join the fight. But it would take time to recall their scattered fleets, time they didn't have. "We'll buy you that time," Davis said. He turned to Sergeant Thompson. "Ready for some more fun behind enemy lines?" Thompson grinned, all teeth. "Born ready, sir." And so began a campaign of daring raids and sabotage. The Indomitable would drop out of warp deep in Skrik territory, unleashing teams of human and Denobulan commandos to wreak havoc on enemy ships. They planted viruses in Skrik computer systems, rigged warp cores to overload, and generally raised hell wherever they went. Thompson led from the front, his rangers leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. But the victories came at a terrible cost. With each raid, more good soldiers didn't make it back. The Skrik seemed endless, willing to sacrifice thousands of drones without hesitation. Davis stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching another Skrik battlecruiser erupt into a fireball. But for every ship they took out, 3 more seemed to take its place. "We can't keep this up," Chen said softly. Davis nodded grimly. They needed a game changer, and fast. As if in answer to his thoughts, an alarm blared. "Skrik transmission incoming," the comms officer reported. "It's different from the others." Davis leaned forward, a spark of desperate hope kindling in his chest. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, filled with the chittering language of the Skrik. But underneath, yes, there it was. A pattern, a rhythm. It was the most beautiful sound Davis had ever heard. Music. The rhythmic pattern in the Skrik transmission faded, leaving Captain Davis with a renewed sense of purpose. He turned to his crew, their faces etched with exhaustion and hope. "We've bought time, but now we strike at the heart of the beast," Davis said, his voice steady. "Chen, bring up the intercepted Skrik transmissions." Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across her console, projecting a holographic display of swarming insectoid ships. At the center, a massive structure pulsed with eerie biomechanical energy. "That's our target," Davis pointed. "The Skrik Hive Nexus. We take it out. We cripple their entire invasion force. Sergeant Thompson stepped forward, his weathered face set with fierce dedication. My Rangers are ready, sir. Just say the word. Davis nodded. Assemble a joint strike team. We'll need our best and brightest for this one. Hours later, the Indomitable hung in the shadow of a shattered moon, cloaked from Skrik sensors. Davis stood in the launch bay, surrounded by a mix of human and Denobulan operatives. Their armor gleamed dully in the low light, weapons primed and ready. This is it, people, Davis said, his voice carrying across the bay. We get in, we plant the charges, we get out. The unyielding commitment provide cover fire, but once we're inside that hive ship, we're on our own. Thompson clapped a hand on Davis's shoulder. We've got your back, Captain. The strike team's shuttles screamed out of the Indomitable's launch bay, streaking towards the looming bulk of the Skrik hive nexus. Pulse cannons flashed, carving a path through the swarm of defensive drones. Davis gripped the shuttle's handrail as they smashed through the hive ship's outer membrane. The craft ground to a halt in a cavernous chamber filled with pulsing organic circuitry. Go, 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 Thompson bellowed. The strike team poured out, immediately met by a hail of plasma fire from Skrik warriors. Davis ducked behind a writhing mass of biotech, the acrid stench of burnt chitin filling his nostrils. They fought their way deeper into the ship, room by room, corridor by corridor. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing and undulating. Skrik defenders swarmed from every direction, their mandibles clicking in alien fury. Captain, Deneb called out, gesturing towards a massive chamber ahead. I believe that's the command nexus. They burst onto the bridge, a cathedral-like space filled with chittering Skrik technicians. At the center, a pulsing node of neural tissue connected to countless data streams. Cover me! Deneb shouted, rushing towards the central node. Davis and Thompson laid down suppressing fire as Deneb interfaced with the neural matrix. The Denobulan's eyes went wide as he absorbed the torrent of information. By the gods, Deneb whispered, their hive mind. It spans entire star systems. A violent tremor rocked the ship. Chen's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, the Andorian fleet just arrived. They're opening fire. Davis cursed. Deneb, overload that processor. We need to go. Energy beams lanced through the hive ship's hull. Explosions ripped through compartments. Davis saw Thompson go down, a Skrik warrior's blade buried in his chest. Thompson! Davis screamed, but there was no time. The ship was coming apart around them. Deneb's containment field snapped into place just as a massive explosion tore through the command nexus. The strike team huddled within the shimmering barrier as the hive ship disintegrated around them. When the dust settled, Davis found himself in an escape pod, hurtling away from the dying Skrik vessel. His heart ached as he thought of Thompson and the others left behind. The comm crackled to life. Captain Davis, an Andorian voice cut through the static. Your gambit worked. The Skrik fleet is in disarray. Davis closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of bittersweet victory. They'd won the battle, but at a terrible cost. And somehow he knew the war was just the beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.